good.
Yeah.
Good. I think Caitlin's doing better.
She is doing really well. So let's get into it. We're talking about Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
Who, if you don't know who she is, probably already the most famous female basketball player, on
We
the
do
planet.
now.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
She's making lots of headlines right now because she had an unbelievable college run and just is set up for all this money in endorsements and everything else that's coming her way out of college. Despite the fact that she's only going to make something like 75 or 80,000 in the WNBA as a rookie.
As a number one
right,
pick.
as the number one overall pick, right.
Yeah.
But it's a small league. The league had some troubles 5, 10, 15 years ago and actually constricted. I think they only have like 8 teams now, but hopefully they're going to expand. But, this is a big win for female athletics and for the WNBA, right?
I think this year specifically has been great. I think there's a lot of storylines coming in from college, and if they manage to translate that into the WNBA, hopefully, one of the biggest issues was always viewership and attendance in games, and I think that hopefully that translates to more people coming to games, because I know when I went to one of the Sparks games with my daughter, I don't even think that the arena was half full. And at that time, they were like one of the better teams in the league.
Got to start somewhere. I mean, remember, we take it back a little bit to women's soccer club, right?
Yeah.
Look at the women's Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, the Women's Champions League. The very touchy-feely viewership, and all of a sudden, look at it now, some years later, they're televising the games, they're generating revenue. So I think the same thing with women's basketball. I think it takes some time for people to get used to the idea that, you got these teams coming in, the viewership, how competitive is it really? And honestly, it's maybe one of the coaches, it's about getting to know the players, getting to know the people. It's like, characters in a movie. Then you get someone to root for, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I like this player. I like Caitlin. You know what team is she playing on? Oh, let me check out this team. You know what? I'm a fan, And then from there on, it's going to translate to the more contracts, the more viewership they have, the more money they make. And you touch on the subject, and she's making about $75,000 or $76,000. She's going to get a nice, juicy contract from Adidas or Nike or one of those sponsors, which is great because they deserve it.
Well, she signed.
Yeah.
She signed with Nike. So Under Armour offered her $16 million. Adidas offered her something ridiculous like $4 or $5 or $6 million. Nike said, "Screw all that. Here's $28 million. We're going to give you your own shoe." It's fantastic. And somebody I was just talking to the other day, I don't know if it was you, but it's like, kids growing up, basketball players, they want to wear the shoe of their idols.
Yes.
Michael Jordans are popular, right? And
Yes.
everybody else has their shoe, the LeBrons, the Kobes, the whatever. But
Caitlin.
what do the women players wear? What do the female basketball players wear? Are they
That's
just
right.
wearing the women's versions of
That's right.
the LeBron? No, now they're going to wear the Caitlin Clarks, right?
And it's interesting. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, Draymond Green. There was when there was a whole discussion about the pay equality between the women's soccer players and the men's soccer players. And one thing Draymond Green said at the time was interesting. He said, you got to create your own storylines. You got to create your own league. You got to create your own.
That's right.
And it's interesting that I think really the last few years, especially in women's basketball, with Reese and Caitlin Clark, I think it's creating those stories that people are watching and people want to go and watch. Look, I don't think I remember watching women's basketball that much, but I did watch this year and at least follow that storyline.
Look, the big storyline, really what put NBA on the map like it is today, was Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird.
That's
and
right.
they met in the 1979 NCAA men's basketball championship game, right? And it was Magic versus Bird, and it was a big story. Right?
It feels a little bit like this here, right? As
Okay.
well.
And Bird went to the NBA the next year, and Magic was there 2 years later, and the whole 80s was Magic versus Bird, Lakers versus Celtics, and it totally changed the NBA. They were not. It was baseball and everything else, right, including NBA. So maybe this is you mentioned Angel Reese, you mentioned the South Carolina players, right? Semifinal game, which was Caitlin Clark's Iowa versus Angel Reese's LSU. That semifinals game this year was the highest viewed basketball game ever on ESPN. Crazy.
I think is it the sport or is it the entertainment?
You know, it's interesting. You touched on soccer a couple times in this conversation, and I think soccer is really the catalyst here for female athletics, because if we think back, like really our real only sort of consistent excitement with female athletics traditionally has been something like the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
You can get behind a star American, you know, maybe it's a gymnast, Simone Biles, or, you know, Mary Lou Retton going way back, or a runner like FloJo or somebody like that. But it's every 4 years, and it's sort of transient. It's here for a couple weeks, and then it's gone, and then nobody pays attention to female athletics. Then comes along the national team for the women, and yeah, they won. They won in '99 or whatever it was, or '94, right. And there was a little bit of fanfare. But this 2015 team with Megan Rapinoe and those guys that won, suddenly now it's like people want female athletics.
Huge thing. The Women's World Cup.
Huge. But what I'm saying is, in the 4 years in between those World Cups, suddenly there's now like this hunger for female athletics in this country, at least.
Well, I think it's also specifically with team sports.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had tennis where you had specific star power or tennis players who kind of transcended the usual women that they were making, maybe golf or certain other things. But I think it's interesting that I think you're right. After that particular Women's World Cup, it really shot up all the women's team sports into a whole new level, including in college. And even if you look at the attendance at, I think my daughter was watching, and there was a women's college volleyball.
Yeah.
Filled up arenas.
Last time I touched the basketball was to pump up some air into the box that's sitting in our backyard. And here I am talking about women's basketball. So obviously it did something.
So let me ask you this. So we know that Caitlin Clark was an excellent college player, right? She broke the all-time record scoring, men's or women's. She is the all-time leading scorer in college basketball ever. And the crazy thing is she had another year of eligibility in college. She could have come back and put it even further out of reach, although I really doubt anybody hits it where she put it.
Because of COVID, right?
They got an extra eligibility from COVID. How is she going to be as a pro? Is she going to be as good, as dominant as a pro?
You know, regardless, hopefully she'll be just as great as she is in college. But I think the storyline, people follow storylines. It's been proven to be true in every sport, male or female. If the storyline is there, people will come watch it. And I think with the storyline that they've created in college, because I think she was by far the main player on that Iowa team. By far. Easy. Yeah. So you really would think that her talent will translate into the WNBA just as well. She can be just as dominant. And hopefully those storylines will continue. And if the storylines will continue, I think people will keep on coming and they'll keep on watching.
Yeah, it's a cool story.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
I think it's a cool story. I'm a big fan of hers, and I really hope that...
I'm excited. I'm excited to see where the future goes. I'm excited to see the big contracts, because they know something we don't know yet. So clearly the trend is there, and we're going to be a few years from now.
We'll come back the game in a bar. Next June. See what happens.
Yeah, let's come back. Exactly. We're going to see who's in the next draft and how she did.
Right.
Is she going to win Rookie of the Year? Is she going to win MVP? Anyway, all right, guys.
All right.
Good talk.
Sounds good.
Good talk.
Good talk.
All right.
See you, man.